I think it was kind of being talked about as, look, the Jags are still in pole position to get him back. Like, that was what everybody was expecting. And then there were reports that, like, last minute, there was a division rival coming in to hijack this deal. Who was it going to be? And eventually it's the Tennessee Titans. 4-year, $92 million deal with $50 million guaranteed that pairs Calvin Ridley with Will Levis in Tennessee. What did you make of that deal?
Yeah, so obviously the dynamic at play here that was interesting the whole time was the Jaguars wanted to wait until after 4 o'clock yesterday,
Right,
because that changed the conditions of their trade with Atlanta, where if they signed Calvin Ridley before that, then they would have given the Atlanta Falcons a second-round pick in this upcoming draft. Because they waited until after 4, it's a third-round pick. And, there's some thinking of, let's let him go through tampering, let him hear some offers, but ideally we just sign him and bring him back at the end of that window. And unfortunately, it kind of worked against him, where he probably was able to gauge some interest. You mentioned our guy, Pretty Ricky, shouting out the other AFC South team that was interested, which of course became the Tennessee Titans. So I'll say this: does it look bad that they gave up what was like? I think it's going to be a 5th-round pick and a 3rd-round pick now. And you now have Trevor Lawrence that is going to be throwing the ball to Christian Kirk, Gabriel Davis, Parker Washington, and Zay Jones. Yeah, it looks terrible. At the same time, 4 years, $92 million with $50 million in guarantees for a soon-to-be 30-year-old wide receiver, as good as he is. And I'm a fan of Calvin Ridley. I think his drop issue was overstated last year. I think his film still shows a great separator. That's a massive, massive contract for Calvin Ridley.
it really is. And I'm kind of okay with this from Jacksonville's perspective. Like, number one, I think you're right. It's the kind of contract that you probably want to walk away from, in terms of, like, this feels like, when the bidding at an auction just goes too high. You've got a line, right? This is what this is worth, and I'm not going higher than that. And then the bidding goes insane. There's a point at which you walk away, right? Because it's no longer value. It's no longer smart money that you're spending. You're just trying to win the auction. Like, that's what this felt. So I think from that point of view, Jacksonville is smart to walk away from this deal. I also think, I've made this point before, I don't love the combination of Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk in the same offense. I think they're too similar what they do well. I think they cannibalize each other's targets. I don't think they complement each other and work well as a duo. I actually think Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk make a bit more sense, even if, like, Ridley is a better wide receiver than Gabe Davis. But I think Gabe Davis is a better combination with Christian Kirk than Ridley is. So I think they're actually okay there. And obviously you've got the draft to come, and you can still grab players and add players. And by the way, there's other receivers out there, like Marquise Brown. We might get to him later when we start talking about the best available. Like, there's guys like that might be had for a shorter, less expensive deal, even if it's a kind of prove it type of concept. You might end up better off anyway. From Tennessee.
And I'll say this. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
Just real quick, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I haven't loved their free agency period, but I have loved 2 moves they've made, and you could argue maybe it's more important for Trevor Lawrence. That is, first, adding Mitch Morse at center, which is a massive upgrade. You bring a veteran, the nose Doug Peterson, and then second, they deserve credit. They signed Ezra Cleveland to that extension a couple days before free agency at left guard, before we find out that the guard market is going to take off on a rocket ship to Jupiter. So 2 good moves to add protection for Trevor Lawrence. Maybe you make the argument, let's just keep him upright and healthy, and that matters more than spending crazy at wide receiver.
Right. And then from Tennessee's point of view, I think it's more interesting. It's a lot of money. Whereas Jacksonville look a little bit foolish because they traded for Ridley and then end up letting him walk, Tennessee looks pretty foolish because they wouldn't give A.J. Brown a $100 million contract. And a couple of years later, they're giving Calvin Ridley a $92 million contract with $50 million guaranteed. Like, that's not a great image when you put those two next to each other.
Yeah, and he's like 5 years older than what A.J. Brown was at that time as well.
And, significantly worse.
Sure. Right, and last piece, now Treylon Burks, who was the A.J. Brown replacement in theory, is your number 3. Although I do think, because of the lack of success so far, put Treylon Burks back in the slot as the big slot where he played a ton at Arkansas, and see if that works. I think they should explore that and see if it's a better fit for him.
Well, it kind of comes back to this idea of what does the aggregate of your receiving core start to look like? Like last year, I was a huge fan of adding DeAndre Hopkins to just give the quarterback something, anything to work with, right? And we saw that. Like Will Levis comes in, immediately has a connection because he's willing to just throw the ball up to Nuke and let him go make some plays. Now, I think Nuke is still a really high-level receiver, but the one thing he doesn't have is the stuff that Calvin Ridley is really good at. He's got deep speed. He's got separation ability. Like Ridley actually complements Hopkins perfectly, and then that leaves you with Treylon Burks as the guy to figure a role for, right? And I think because he's, physically big, he's got speed. Like and his entire gig in college was like a gimmick in every single way you could think of to make use of him. I feel like you can make that work, right? We've got the possession contested catch guy that we've got faith in. We've got the separator that can run deep, and Treylon Burks can just do everything else that's in the playbook that we don't have an answer for right now. I feel like as a trio that should work, and obviously signals intent to let's get Will Levis, like let's give him a chance, right? We're trying to fix the offensive line this season. Let's fix the wide receiver core, and at the very minimum, we're coming out of next year knowing whether Will Levis is the guy or not.
And that's the last piece. Like, look, we should look at every single move in a vacuum. It is an overpay if you want to look at just that move. You get the best center on the market available, and I actually like the value there for Lloyd Cushenberry. I think it's a fair deal for all parties. You get a veteran, good pass protecting, good center, and you get the best receiver available on the open market. You can quibble about the price point, whatever. Hey, we're going to find out if Will Levis is our quarterback or not. And we're making the investments to be able to say definitively, like, if it goes poorly, there's no excuse of, he didn't have pass catchers, didn't have protection, and obviously the offensive line could still get better. But you are now making it where you get a definitive conclusion, this is our guy or not. There's value inherently in that by itself.
And by the way, I'm well aware that, the A.J. Brown decision and the Calvin Ridley decision are made by different front offices, essentially. People speak of teams in institutional terms, and the institution of the team looks dumb by comparison when you stack those two things up against each other. But yeah, like I think it's a good signal of intent that they want to go out and give Will Levis every opportunity to make plays, and I think the way that they've assembled this group is smart. Like just as I think Calvin Ridley is worth different things to different teams. I think he's worth less to Jacksonville because that combination with Christian Kirk doesn't necessarily work. I think he's worth more to Tennessee because I think the combination with Nuke Hopkins, albeit just theoretical right now, is one I think that should work. So maybe Tennessee overpaid a bit, but I do like the move in abstract terms for them. I think it makes sense. And I also like Jacksonville's side of it in terms of walking away. So kind of a weird move in terms of sort of makes sense for everybody.
Yeah, no, I suppose so. And that is a good point on the institution. Like, same concept of trading Brian Burns. Everyone's like, well, Carolina turned down two ones and a two. Look, Brant Tillis and Dan Morgan did not turn down 2 ones and a 2. That was a different group of people. And obviously those people, they regret that decision. And yes, it's not great to now sell for cheaper, but they, I think, made the correct decision of where they are right now. The player did not want to be there. Just get some assets, move on. And hey, 24 hours later, they made an awesome trade for Deontay Johnson.
Right. And it's definitely easier. Like, it's obviously easier to be not burdened by previous mistakes when you are not the people that made them, right? Like, as an institution, you'd be like, we sunk costs and we did this. And, like, can't do that after doing this. Like, I didn't do that. Somebody else did that, and he's no longer working here because of the mistake. I'm just working with the assets and the offers and the opportunities that I have on the table, and the best move for this organization is whatever it is.